All right. Believe it or not, it's week 9. We got week 9 out of 10 here. We're kind of wrapping up. We're getting close to the end of the quarter. If you want to know sort of what the plan is for this class, we have homework 6 that's out right now. That's a snake game. It's due, I believe, next Monday. I think that's right. And that'll be week 10. I'm going to have a homework 7. And I know that's not probably exciting news for you. But that's because we don't have a final exam, so you're welcome. You don't have to take a final, right? So it could be worse. I know you have a lot of stuff going on, so it's going to go out around here. I might post it a day or two early in case you want to try to kind of get ahead so you can get done with this class. It's going to be due down here during, I guess, what would you call week 11, which would be finals week. It'll be due somewhere during that week. I'm going to try to make it so that homework 7 is not the hardest assignment of the quarter, because I don't want to crush you right as you're dealing with your finals and stuff. But there will be a 7th assignment. I guess if you're content with how you've done on your assignments and you have been going to your sections, you theoretically could just not do assignment 7, but probably a lot of you will do it. So anyway, that'll be there eventually. What we're going to do, let's see, I guess before I talk about this week, I'll mention, last Thursday I was gone. I was at a conference, you guys had a presentation from Sarah. She talked about localizing apps. How'd that go? Did she do okay? Yeah?
She did a good job.
Yeah, cool. Great.
Her French is really good.
Her French is really good? Yeah, well, I pitched to her, like, hey, do you want to give this localization lecture? And I said you can pick whatever language you want, but some of my slides kind of have French things on them, and she's like kind of saying, well, I don't know, do I know all the phrases I need to know? And I'm like, it's funnier if you don't know the phrase. You just put like Le McDonald's or whatever, and just trust me, it'll be fine. So, I mean, the principle of it is the thing. Might seem like a weird topic, localization, but it is pretty important. I mean, if you're going to make an app and you're going to like actually sell it to people, you probably want your app to feel right to all the users. So, the designers of Android Studio thought localization was important. Have you ever been noticing when you're coding, some of your code will just get like highlighted yellow and stuff, and it's usually like a little warning, like you could make this function private or whatever, right? Like you could make this var into a val. So the Android Studio kind of tries to warn you about better coding paradigms that you could be using, right? And anytime you ever write a string in your code anywhere, like in your XML for the text of a button, or in your Kotlin code to set the text of a control, it'll highlight that in yellow. And if you hover on there, like, why is this yellow? I don't know if you ever did that. Like all course long, I've just been like not talking about that. But if you're like OCD like me, and you're like, I don't want any yellow highlights on anything, and you hover on that, it'll say something like, oh, you should make this into a resource. You should extract it. Basically, the designers of Android Studio, they think that localization is so important that they want you to just always be mindful of an app that isn't localized from just, even if it's just like a Hello World app, they want you to be mindful of that. So it's kind of interesting. Anyway, localization is something that you may do for assignment 7. If when that goes out, I'll have you, play with that a little bit there. It's also the topic of our section today and tomorrow. So you're going to try to localize some code and see if you can get it to work in another language. Okay, so going forward, the next topic I want to teach you about today. Oh, I guess, sorry, before I'll start again, I meant to say like why I was gone. Why I wasn't here last Thursday is I went to a teaching conference. Every year it's called SIG CSE, the Special Interest Group for Computer Science Educators. It's great. It's like all the CS nerds who teach from around the country, around the world get together, and they share teaching tips and new ideas and new homework assignments and just all kinds of cool things. One thing that was really cool this year was one of my colleagues, fellow CS lecturer Cynthia Lee, who works here, she got presented with an award for, she and her colleagues got the like #4 most outstanding influential paper like ever presented in the 50-year history of this conference, which is like a really fucking prestigious award. I don't know, #4 sounds like, I didn't even get a bronze medal for that, but like that's like 4 out of infinity. There's like so many papers that have been written, and she and her group got this like top 10 ever award. It was really cool. So anyway, I enjoyed that. Now I'm back and I'm sleep deprived, but here we go. So today's topic, I want to talk about something called services and a related topic called notifications. So the general principle here, like why we're going to talk about this, is because you're going to want to write apps that are sort of what you might call like omnipresent on your phone. You know how like sometimes you're not in Facebook or WhatsApp or whatever, but those apps are still around. They're still, maybe they're checking for messages and they're popping up a notification if you get a message. There is a notion of apps that are still sort of lurking even when you're not actively using them, right? And this concept from today called services sort of helps you accomplish that. So that's why we're going to talk about that today. So let me start my slides. Okay. A service is when your app runs a task that runs in the background. So I don't know if that's even clear what I mean by that. Like, what's the background? Well, I mean, the foreground is like you're using an app and you see it on the screen in front of you, right? So if you're in an activity and you're actively using an app, it's sort of in the foreground. Now, you guys have this notion of like, I can exit out of an app. There's usually sort of this panic button, like on an iPhone. There's just this big button that you press and it just zooms you out to the desktop kind of, right? And a lot of Android devices have a similar thing. And so you're not like in that app anymore, right? But a lot of times the app is still around. We talked about this activity life cycle, on, pause, on, stop, all this kind of stuff, right? And how sometimes even after you exit out of an app, the app doesn't totally go away and you can come back to the app or something like that. But this is a little stronger statement than this. I'm talking about an app that you might not have used for a month. So there's no way it's like sitting around because you just were in it 5 seconds ago. I'm talking like you haven't even been using this app for a while. So a service is something that runs even if you don't see any sort of UI on the screen. It can be in accompaniment with an activity, like the activity's on the screen and the service is in the background, or some apps just launch a service that runs when the phone boots up and the service just sits there. And even if you haven't ever loaded the activity or loaded the app, the service is still running. So, I mean, why would you want to do something like that? Well, I mean, just think of some examples. I mentioned these apps that are always present, like that you can get messages from WhatsApp or Snapchat or something like that, right? You could also have like your music player where you've exited out of the app and the music is still playing. A downloader, a chatting program, all kinds of different things, right? All of these apps run a service, one or more services that lurk in the background to manage these tasks, okay? So again, anything that you want to run for a long time. That's what a service is. And that's the concept of a service is not particular to Android or even to mobile development, but we have it here. We're going to learn about it. If you want to use a service in Android, you can create one, and I'll talk about how to code one in a minute, but somehow it has to be launched. Well, one way of launching a service is that your app can have an activity that starts a service. You start a service using an intent. So we've used intents before. We use intents to start activities and to sort of jump from one context to another. We sort of do that using intents. Same thing here. One thing that's kind of confusing about services is that there are 2 types of services. Good old Android, they always just pack a little bit of confusion on top of everything just to make sure that you don't get it right away, right? The first kind of services are ones that are started, which you launched the service and it just sits around until either the phone turns off, like battery dies, or until the service itself decides it wants to shut itself down, or it's possible for a user to dig around in certain menus in the operating system and manually like stop services, but it's harder to do that. Like, when you pop up the list of your apps and you can swipe them away to sort of close them, that's for apps. That doesn't let you close services there. So, but you can, if you know where to dig in the menus, you can close a service. But a service that's been started is going to just keep running until one of those specific events occurs to stop it from running. The other mode that a service can run in is called binding mode. A service that's in binding mode is more like a task running service that's doing some specific work, and then when it's done doing that work, it just closes down kind of automatically. I'm not going to focus on the binding type of service because far more often what I've seen is you just sort of want to launch this thing in the background and it lives for a long, long time, and then you decide if you want it to shut down. The binding service is more for things like downloads or updates or specific short things. So I have not used it nearly as often. And frankly, you could write the code to simulate binding in a started service just by shutting it down yourself. But anyway, services do have life cycles. They get created and they run and they get on destroyed. So there's kind of these on whatever methods. I don't use them as often with services because a service doesn't get like paused and resumed in the way that an activity does because it's not like on the screen and getting knocked off the screen and so forth, right? The main thing is that you would have an onCreate method, which is almost like your initializer, your constructor to set up things. There's another particular method we're going to learn about a lot called onStartCommand, which is sort of like when the service is being asked to do some work and it responds to that work and goes and starts working on it. So I'll show you how that works in a minute, but that's kind of the idea. They have a life cycle, but you don't really think about it all that much so far, okay? So how do you make a service? Well, in your project, you go to the left pane with all your different pieces and stuff, and you can either dig up in the top menus, but I like to sort of just right-click over here where you have all your code and your activities and stuff. And you can say new, and instead of new class or new activity or whatever, you say new service. There's a couple choices, but you just say new service, asks for the name, and you type it in, and then you've got a new Kotlin file that you can edit. When you create a new activity, you get an XML file and you get a Kotlin file, right? When you create a service, you only get a Kotlin file. Why do you think that you don't get an XML file? Yeah?
It's supposed to be running in the background, so there's nothing to display.
Yeah, the XML file is usually for the layout and the widgets and the graphics and stuff, and like a service, the whole point of a service is it doesn't like show a screen of UI. That's not what a service is. So yeah, you don't have that. That's right. Okay, good. So you make a new service. When you add a service to a project, you're supposed to go mark information about it in your program's manifest XML file. Now, you guys won't ever really need to do that, because if you go do that user interface I showed you a second ago where you say new service, it'll already add it to here for you. And in fact, when you add new activities to an app, you have to add them here also. And you probably don't remember that because you never had to do it because Android Studio did it for you. I'm just mentioning this because it does need to be there, and if it's not there, the whole app will not allow that service to run. And the only way I could imagine that you guys would ever encounter this problem would be if you were like copying and pasting between projects or something. You created the service over here and you copy paste it to the project over there, but you didn't copy over the manifest changes. You know what I mean? Like, other than that, I don't think you'd ever encounter this, but it has to be declared. Do you have any idea why? Why do you think this manifest wants you to write down the names of all the services? Why doesn't it just look what's in the directory, look at the names of all the services, and then just use all those? What do you think? What's the point of this? What do you think?
So for like security purposes? So
Yeah.
A service that they didn't want?
I may have mentioned it when we talked about having activities declared here, that Android likes you to really be explicit, like here's what activities I have in this app, here's what services I have in this app, and the reason it wants you to do that is there's this hypothetical scenario where somebody's developing an app, they've got the code in GitHub for it, and some other developer says, here, I've got some changes to suggest, and they slip in some secret additional service or activity that is in there now, and the developer didn't notice or something, and that's like an evil service or an evil activity. But as long as they didn't like declare it here, then it wouldn't be allowed to run. So it's just meant as a like constraint so that random services don't somehow start running that you didn't want to run. There's a couple things in these attributes, whether it's enabled, fine, you could turn them off, I guess, but there's also a thing called exported, which means like, are other apps allowed to talk to that service? And I don't use that very much, but whatever. Anyway, you add a service to your app. I'm going to do a coding exercise with you guys here for this today. If you want to play along, I've got it on the website. You can download it. So I'm going to make a program that is a file downloader. I think the best example I would have picked to do a service with you guys would have been some sort of messaging app with like an email or a chat or something, and I'm using a service to notice the messages and show them to you or something. But that's basically what I want Homework 7 to be, so I don't want to like show you that in class. So instead what I'm going to do is I'm going to have an app that shows a list of files that you might want to download so you can save them to your mobile device for some reason. Like maybe you've got a collage of photos, you want to download all the photos. I don't know, it's kind of a stupid idea, but whatever. So when you tap on a file, it'll go download the file, but the file might be really, really big. It might be hundreds of megabytes or something, right? So I bet what you'll do is you'll start the download running, and then you might close my app and go surf the web instead or something else. I don't want the download to just stop because you exited out of my app, so I'm going to do all the downloads in a service. That's the idea. And so what's already written, I don't want to write the whole app from scratch. It would take too long. I've already got a UI. It has, there's kind of like two phases to this. The first part is I want to download some file that's like a list of all the files. And once I download that, I display them as a list view. And then if I tap on any of those list view elements, that's the actual like big file I'm going to go download, okay? And so what I've done is I've made a thing called martystep.com/files, and I just like randomly grabbed files off my hard drive and put them here because I want a different size. Like I've got this video of my dogs that's big, and then I've got a couple like smaller files that aren't so big and just different things in between. I decided to upload these things from my download folder, picture of my dogs, picture of Eve, whatever, right? Just different size of files to play with. And so if you download this list.txt, it's a list of all the other names of all the other files, so then I can put those in the list view. Okay, so I mean I got some code here. I do have, so the main screen and stuff is called a downloader activity. So I have already made something called download service. So like what I would have done is right click here and say new service, and I would have typed in download service. So that's kind of what we're going to do, okay? I haven't written the code for the service, but it already exists. So that's the plan. So I've already, my app already has an entry that says like download service in it, in the manifest. So if I open up the manifest, it says I have an activity called downloader activity, that's fine. And it says I've got a service called download service. So that's basically that slide I had up just on a second ago, okay? So the download service is going to be actually pulling the bytes from the server, however long that takes, and saving them to the device, disk or something, right? Okay. If you want to write a service, it looks like this. You write a class that extends a superclass named service, that's like part of Android, and then this is the most important method. You write a method called onStartCommand. What this means is that the activity of the app can send commands to you, and then you can execute them. But what does it mean to receive a command and execute it? Well, I mean, it totally depends what your app is. Like, I mean, what's one command in the app we're going to write today? What do you think? I mean, just conceptually, don't worry about the stupid code, right? Like what sort of commands am I going to send to a service in the app I'm writing? Yeah?
Marty, can you repeat like the purpose of the app?
Okay, sure. The app is going to show me a list of files, and when I tap on one of those files, it's going to download that file and save it to the mobile disk, the drive on the phone. The idea would be like maybe I have a whole bunch of photos or a whole bunch of files I'm interested in, and I could tell the device all the files are located at this URL, and it will give me the list of all their names, and I can tap them and download them, and now I've saved a copy for myself on my device. So, I mean, those are the commands basically, is you'd say, hey service, please download this file. Hey service, please download that file. Each individual request like that to the service is a command, let's say. And so the service implements that by writing this method called onStartCommand, which takes, I mean, I would say just like all things Android, this is a little more opaque and confusing than it needs to be. The main thing that gets passed in here is an intent. The activity makes an intent, sends it to the service receives it here. Hopefully inside of that intent is some sort of information. Remember how intents work. You can like put extra stuff in there before you launch the intent, right? Just like when you start an activity. You guys have been doing that for a few assignments now, right? So the activity now sends an intent full of goodies to here, and I unpack the intent goodies and I use them to do whatever it is work that I need to do. Presumably there's some kind of URL packed in here that I'm going to use to know what I need to download, right? That's the point of this app. So that's the general structure of what it looks like. It doesn't just take the intent parameter, it also takes these weird things for like flags and an integer and stuff, and I don't know what they do. I've never used them. They have to be there. I'm not going to look at them at all. Google it if you care. I don't care. The method needs to return an int when it's done working. And the int is just some sort of status code about what kind of service this is. And so you're supposed to return one of some small number of constants. And like the constants represent, like, is your service going to shut down right away, or is it going to stick around? And so you return start sticky if your service is going to stick around, which we are. So I've never written a service that didn't return that, and all the examples on the web return that. So I think it's kind of dumb design, but that's what they want you to do. Yes?
I actually have a conceptual question. So
Sure.
is the point of having a service that instead of running your code in your activity KT, you just basically migrate that code over to the service so that it doesn't stop running when you close the app?
Yes, that's exactly the point. You're exactly right. Yeah, I mean, I think the confusing thing a little bit is you guys have not thought about this sort of thing at all so far, or at least you have not had to. You've written an app, you need to get this to work, you need the app to do this, you need the app to do that. You've lived in this world where your app is the star of the show, and you haven't had to very much think about, like, well, what if the user's in the middle of doing stuff in my app, and then they just like bail out of my app and they stop using it and they go surf Twitter for an hour and then they come back. Well, maybe you'd say, oh well, the app quits or something, but like, what if the user's in the middle of doing some hard working thing that takes a long time? You don't want the app to just maybe stop. I think most users who bail out of apps that are doing stuff, they sort of hope that the app will keep doing the stuff. And so this is the way to accomplish that. This thing will not shut itself down when the user bails out of your app and exits your app. Even if they open up the list of apps and swipe your app away, go away app, this thing will still be alive. And so you're absolutely right that, like, whatever it is that we're going to do here, I mean, I didn't plan to do this today, but we could write the code to like download all these files in the activity first and then move it, like literally paste it from the one file of the activity over to the file of the service. We could do that. I'm just going to write it in the service file. But like, yeah, we're going to have the activity send a message to the service and say, please download this file or please do this task that's going to take a long time. That's the idea. Yeah.
Like, will the service run even when the app is running? Like, will it run then, or it just works when you close your app or something?
It'll be both. It'll run while the app is running, and then if the app exits, it will continue to run. Right. So it doesn't need the app to close in order to run the service, but it will continue to run if the app is closed. So since Android makes everything multiple layers more confusing than it needs to be, do you remember how I said there were two types of services? There were these ones that start and run, and then there were these ones that are bound and then they shut down automatically later or something. You basically have to write a method for each of those two types of services. This onStartCommand one is a service that keeps running, and this onBind one sort of is for handling a given task and then shutting down. Unfortunately, like, I don't want to do this, I want to do this, but it makes you write both or else the code won't compile because Android is kind of stupid. So you have to write this method with this header, and if you don't want to do this, you just say return null. So all my services just have this waste of 3 lines at the bottom. It's stupid. They didn't ask me when they built this stuff. I don't know. I don't know what to tell you. Like, if we can figure this crap out, like, we'll go make a whole bunch of money making Android apps that no one else can comprehend, right? So that's the plan. So let me try to glue some of these pieces together here, help you see kind of how it works. So the downloader program that we're going to write, so let me show you kind of what it has in it. I think I can run it. You know, what I always do is I always solve it, and then I delete all the parts I want to code with you guys, right? So if I run this, it's got this text editor box, and it lets you type in, like, where do I want to get a list of files from? Now, I mean, it's kind of stupid because, like, I have made this list of files right here. I don't know of lots of other such lists of files, but you have to pretend that there are. So if you say get list, it's going to download this file whose contents are that, the name of all the other files. Then it's going to split it by the line breaks and make a list view out of all these thingies. So, like, the code I already have says, I don't know why this is underlined, but it'll say, you know, go to this URL, use ion to get that URL as a string, and then split it by /n, and then turn it into an array adapter thing, okay? You might say, well, wait. Ion downloads things from a URL. If I have Ion, why do I need your stupid program, Marty? I guess what I would say is that Ion is great, but it's like, Ion's a very active thing. It's like while you're sitting there, it'll download, and so it's not really going to keep running in the background. So Ion doesn't overlap too much with what I want to do. So if I run this and I say get the list, it's going to download that text file and put all those things in here. So the goal is I want to make it when I click on these, it'll go download that actual file using a service. That part doesn't work yet. If you click on a file, it says, okay, for that index, I'm going to go look up in my list of things, what file is that? What's that file name? So then I kind of have a URL for that. And I'll just say I want to download that URL. So like if I go here, this is kind of where we come in. I just have a few lines of code here to like toast like what file it is I'm downloading. I think if I just tap here, like it says I'm downloading this, but it doesn't. Right? It's a lie. The toast is a lie. I think that's how that one game ends, right? So to do, download using a service. Okay, so what you would do is you would make a service like download service, extend service. I make this onStart command. I make this onBind that I don't even want. And now in here, like basically I need to put some code here, and this code here is going to be waiting for a request to come in, and I need to put some code here that sends such a request. So how do I send a request? I believe that's coming right up. Here's what you do. You make an intent. We've done that before. Usually you say like this, and then you write the name of an activity, remember? And you say class.java. But instead now you write the name of a class that's a service. And just like before, you can put extra data in here. And you don't have to, but you probably want to. And then when you're ready, instead of saying start activity with that intent, you say start service. So this should be fairly similar to stuff you guys have seen, right? You can also, this is assuming that the code here is running in an activity. It's pretty similar to do it if you're in a fragment, but we're not going to do that today. So back here, if I want to start up the service, I'd say like val intent equals an intent with this activity, and it runs the downloader service class.java. So what do I want to put in the intent? Like extra data. I mean, I could just say start service with this intent, right?
You want to add the URL.
Yeah, I need to tell it like what is it that you're downloading. Like, I mean, maybe that, I don't know how unclear all this crap is because it's kind of hard to follow all these pieces, but like each time that you do this, you're sort of telling the service to do a thing, a task. Like you're not just starting it up and then it sits there bored. Like you're saying, I have a specific piece of work I want you to do, you know? So what do I want you to do? I want you to download this URL. So I have a URL parameter here that I'm trying to download. So maybe I'll say, hey, intent, please put this extra data. I'll call it URL, and I'll put the URL in there, right? And I'll start the service. So now where that's going to go is it's going to send me over to downloadservice.kt, and it's going to call this onStart command function. And that intent that I just bundled up is going to be this. You understand? So like this guy over here can like pull that stuff back out of there. Now he knows what file he's supposed to download. So like one thing that's kind of stupid is this parameter is it California intent, you know, like it could be null because it's like backward compatible with some kind of Java crap that could be null. So basically you have to do something like, you know, if intent. You have to use like the exclamations or questions, or I like to just deal with it and just say, you know, if intent is not null, then, and I just put some code in there. Now I don't have to worry about that anymore. So the URL is going to be intent.get string extra called URL. It's just the same little key name that I put in the activity when I put it in the first place. So maybe just to make sure everything's working, maybe I'll say like log.d download service. They want me to download this URL, URL. Okay, just want to make sure he's getting those messages. So I will run this, and I will click on one of these guys. We'll see what we get. So I'm going to click eve.jpg. Download service, they want me to download this URL. So I mean, I'm sending a message basically across the boundary between those two classes now. That seems to be working, right? It looks like it only shows one slash. I think that's just a log artifact. I'm pretty sure both of the slashes are there, but whatever. Cool, so far so good. Use an intent to launch a service. Yeah. Any questions so far? Yeah.
Are you going to use Ion to download or what?
Well, to do the actual downloading, yeah, we can talk about that in a second. I have a library called Downloader that I just wrote that just, you could give it a URL and it'll pull the bytes and give you the bytes or something like that. You could also use Ion here. Yeah, I mean, the main thing is that this guy needs to do the work and not the activity, right? That's what's really important. So I was trying to think, like, what's the simplest way I could prove to you that something is happening here? I mean, these log messages are great or whatever, but I'm not sure I've really convinced you that anything different is happening. So, like, what if I did, so over here, what if I said thread.sleep 5,000. So I'm going to go to sleep for 5 seconds, and then I'm going to do log.d. The activity is still here. Okay, so downloader activity. So I think what I'm trying to do is I want to, like, in the interim of this time, I want to, like, kill this app, and I want to see if I can make it so this message does not show up. But then over here in the service, I want to say sleep, and then I want to say download service. The service is still here. Okay, so I'm gonna try to see if I can, like, snuff out the life of this activity and the service lives on. I think I can prove to you that this is doing something. Although it will require dexterity on my part to do this within a short span of 5 seconds. So let me see if I can do that here. So if I click eve.jpg, okay, go. And then if I swipe up, how do I kill this thing? Uh-oh. Uh-oh. Blew it, didn't I? Get out of here. Application terminated. Wow, cool. What did I do? Did I do it wrong? It's a great demo, huh? Okay, I think, sorry, it's not what I expected. I'm not sure why I don't see this. I'm wondering if it's because Android Studio, when it notices that the app is gone, it severs the connection to the logging facility. Do you know what I mean? So I wonder if a toast would be better. I'm pretty sure this thing is, like, still there. It's just like Android Studio is not talking to. Do you have a question? Or
it says the service is still there.
Oh, it does? Wait, where? Oh, it does. Whoa, am I blind? Wow. Sorry, like, I thought I failed. I'm more powerful than I imagined. So, can you tell I've had, like, an average of about 2 or 3 hours of sleep for the last 5 straight days? Oh, okay. Great. Good stuff. We're all learning lots of things right now. Yes, so, like, the one about the activity being still here, unless I missed it, is not present. Is that correct? And the one about the service still being here is present. The service lives on. The service is awesome. Okay, so far so good, right? We're not actually downloading files yet. We could download the files. I have a downloader thing here, and the downloader has a function called download. It also has a function called download fake because the first time I ever gave this lecture, the internet gave out, and it's really hard to demo this program with no internet. So the next time I gave the lecture, I had a function that would, like, pretend to download the file but wouldn't actually download the file. So you basically want to download this file or pretend to download this file. So you would do something like, downloader.download or download fake or whatever, that URL, and it would go save it to the person's device. Or basically, I mean, I don't really care what this is. It's just like, do the work that the activity has requested for me to do, whatever that might be. Go do that now in here. Yeah.
This is somewhat a little bit off topic, but so for thread.sleep, is that, like, the appropriate way to put in timing delays in your apps, or should you be doing something else? Like, you want a piece of code to, like, you want all your code to run first, and then after, like, 5 seconds, you want it to move to another activity or something.
So it depends on context. I would say it's not always the way. Thread.sleep is not always the way to insert a pause. It's great for things like animation loops, but often if you're, like, in the middle of an event handler and you want to, like, wait a minute and then do something, if you say thread.sleep, you will be putting the event handling thread to sleep, and then that will mean that no other events will work for 5 seconds. So if you click a button and then mash other buttons, none of the clicks will register for the next 5 seconds because you put the thread to sleep. So often what you want to do instead is, launch off some other thread that sleeps for 5 seconds and then does your thing that you want to do. So it's a little more complicated than that. There's also a mechanism that I probably will teach you about this week or next week called coroutines. Kotlin kind of has this feature that's meant for like thready things like this that we're going to talk about a little bit. But thread.sleep is perfectly fine as long as you want to like pause the active execution of what you're looking at on that screen right there. So anyway, we're downloading a fake file. So I want to teach you a few other things about services. So let me launch back into the slides here. One thing you can do, this doesn't really come up as much in this app, but sometimes a service has multiple things that it can do. I think it's implied in our current piece of code that I'll send you a URL and I want you to download it. Well, I mean, that's fine, but you could imagine an app where the service has multiple things it could do. Like maybe if it's a thread for playing music, there might be a play and a pause and a stop and a next track and a previous track. Because you want the music to keep playing even if they exit out of the jukebox GUI, right? But it's not like the service only does one thing. You could imagine you send it the name of a song and it plays it. But if you're in the middle of playing the song, you might want to say pause, resume, skip, whatever. So all of those are different actions that the service might support. So the way that they want you to represent that, I mean, you could just represent that, bless you, by putting some kind of extra parameter in the intent called like action is stop, action is play, action is go to next track. You could do that. But they've provided this small facility for that. Like inside of the intent, there's a property called action. You can set that to something. So, I have to admit, that doesn't really suit this example today. But you could do something like, well, over here, when I'm talking to this, this service, when I'm about to fire it up, maybe I'll say like, hey, intent, your action is to download a file. Just make up that string there. And then over here in the service, I would say like, well, okay, if the intent action is download, I will do this, Now you might say, well, that's not any different, but I don't know, maybe you have some other actions the thing can support, like else if, intent.action is, bark, then you log like rough or something. I mean, you might want to like, upload files or some other kind of thing. So you could have different sorts of behaviors that the service can do based on that value of that action parameter, okay? Again, I'm very much forcing it to use it in this program today, but important in some apps, possibly in your homework 7. Okay, so let's talk about what do you do when the service is done with its work? Because remember, part of the point of this is that the user may have exited the app, right? The service runs in the background if the app's not even on the screen. So what is going to happen when the service finishes its long-running task, when the download is done downloading, when the song is done playing, when the messages arrive, or whatever it is that the service is working on? How are you going to know that? Because like the app is not on the screen, right? And the service doesn't really have a user interface, so how is it supposed to tell you something? If you insert log messages are not seen by users, they're seen by developers. So like, what are we supposed to do? So the typical way that this is done is services have a mechanism where they can send out messages that are called broadcasts. Broadcast is a way for the service to cause someone else to respond, to do something when the service's work has completed. So, there's lots of different things that an app could do when the service is done. Your app could pop back up, or you could pop up a notification to show you that the work is done. There's lots of things you could do. It kind of depends on what the app is for. If you're going to do this, there's basically 2 things that you need to do in your code. One thing is you need to have your service send out a broadcast to anyone who's interested. And the second thing you need to do is you need to have somebody specify that they are interested. And the way you specify that you're interested is you have to learn about something called a broadcast receiver. So I'll show you these pieces, and again, Android makes everything more complicated than it needs to be, but this is how you're going to get this to work. So in the service, when you do all the work and you're done doing the work, you're done downloading the file, whatever, now the typical thing to do would be to send out a broadcast that the work is done. And that, guess what, is done by intents. Intents are used for all kinds of stuff in Android. So you make an intent, you set up whatever extras and actions and thingies in here that you want, and then you send out a broadcast for that intent. So it basically just like throws the intent out to the operating system. It says, hey, does anybody care about this? This download service says he's done with something. Does anybody care about that? And it just sort of looks to see if anybody wants to know about that. So let's do that real quick. So here, suppose I download this fake file, and now here it's like, yay, the download is done, right? So let's tell somebody that the download is done. So let's say val done intent is an intent. Let's say the done intent's action is something like download complete. I don't know, whatever. Anything else we should put in the intent? You think, yeah?
An option to access the file, open the file somewhat, like that's what you do.
Yeah, open the file, access the file, sure. I mean, this app is pretty sketchy, but like something like done intent dot put extra URL, just like what file did I download? Here's the name of, you asked me for this file, now it's finished, here it is. So, because you could imagine you start downloading 3 files and they're all running in the background. And if I say, hey, file complete, you're like, which one? You know, you want to know which file. So that one, that file, you know, that URL. So now you say send broadcast, and you pass the done intent. So, I mean, in theory, like, the activity started up the service, told the service to do some work. The service worked on it for a while. When the service is done, it broadcasts something back to the activity. I mean, this is not quite right because the service does not directly send the broadcast to the activity. The server sends a broadcast to the operating system. Why do you think the service sends broadcast to the operating system and not directly to this activity that probably wants to hear about this? Why we have this middle man here? What do you think, Alex?
Well, it's because isn't the activity not running?
It's certainly possible that the app is not running anymore. So the activity is not alive, it's not up, it's not on the screen, it doesn't exist. Yeah, I mean, it could be still running. You could have just started a download and let your phone sit, but more likely you bailed and you went and surfed Twitter or something. Yes, so that's exactly right. It's because activity might be gone. So if I try to send it a message, it's like not there to hear it. So instead you send it as a broadcast that goes to the whole operating system. This diagram on my slide is really shitty, but it's the best one I could find on Google image search and steal, but whatever. So I send the broadcast to the Android operating system. Now the operating system needs to figure out who should receive the broadcast here. So let's talk about receiving broadcasts. Now, there's lots of ways you could handle this, but typical way you do it is in your activity, you have to create a class. You can have a class inside of a class, and you say private inner class, and you make it an extension of a class called broadcast receiver. So you're creating kind of a little object that knows how to receive these broadcast messages. And we're going to kind of hook that up to the Android operating system so that Android will know that I want to hear about these download complete messages. So you write this class, and in here you're going to write some code to tell it what messages you want to hear and what you want to do in response to those messages. So let me just grab this for a second. This is back in the activity area. You come down, I don't know, here, wherever it is, and you paste this in. Now, I'm not going to call it receiver class name. I'm going to probably call it like download receiver. And it says handle the received broadcast message. Well, okay, there's a little more to it than this because operating systems, the Android operating system is just constantly broadcasting all sorts of shit all over the place. It's broadcasting like your GPS. Hey, does any app need to know our GPS just moved by this many, feet or whatever? It's broadcasting the battery life. It's broadcasting whether you have a Wi-Fi connection and what its reception level is. It's all kind of random shit is getting broadcast all over the place in your operating system. And most of those messages, you do not care about them. And so there has to be some sort of like filter here. I only care about broadcasts that have the following aspects to them, okay? So you don't just write this. Just writing this, Android doesn't know to talk to this or when to talk to this. I have to tell it that. And the way I tell it that is in your activity, you create something called an intent filter and you register your broadcast receiver. So this chunk of code that I have written is basically my app saying, hey, Android operating system, if any broadcasts occur with the following action or the following aspects to them, I want you to tell this guy about them. Okay? So I mean, it's somewhat analogous to like how you register a listener for an event, like set on-click listener or whatever. It's a little bit like that, but instead of in one app's domain, it's like operating system domain. So I think there's a lot of moving parts here. It's a little bit confusing, but you just go back here and basically this service is sending out broadcasts called download complete. Now, I haven't really run into the case of like, what if several different apps have an action called download complete? I think the conventional wisdom here is you want to pick a really long, weird string that no one else is likely to have, but I actually don't know, frankly, what's the conflict resolution mechanism if two apps are using the same action names or whatever. But you come over here in your activity, usually you would do this like when your app loads up, like on create of your activity, and you'd say something like, listen for broadcasts of downloads that are complete. So you'd say something like, you want an intent filter. So you'd say like val filter equals an intent filter. And then you'd say, oh, I have to import this. And then you'd say filter.add action download complete. That's the kind of message I want to hear. And then you'd say register receiver. This takes two parameters, an object that wants to hear the messages and the filter of which messages it wants to hear. So you pass in, down there I made something called the download receiver, and I want to use this filter of messages. So after wiring all that up, it's going to make it so that when this guy is done with downloading, he's going to broadcast out this message about the download being complete. That message is going to get sent by the operating system up to the activity. It's going to fire one of these guys off, and it's going to call this function. So we're going to get here. Okay? Does this make any sense? Make sense? I heard that the section leader community, they make a t-shirt every year, and the t-shirt this year has Jerry, and he's like, makes sense. It's like a cartoon caricature of him or something. I might be buying one of those. Question?
When is on receive called? Like, does that happen when you open the activity back up? Or like, how does it know if you send out a broadcast but the activity is closed? How does it then receive it when you open it?
Right. So basically, how does it know? Like, I don't totally know how all the plumbing works here, but by registering that this guy cares, it's gonna send him the message when the service is done. So the activity is going to fire up and launch this guy's little receiver code. So that's kind of my way of making sure my app will fire up or launch back up when it runs, you know? So like, I mean, let me show you this. I think having some log messages will help make some sense of it. So if I say like log.d, and then I say tag is download receiver, and then the message will be, I guess inside the intent, we've stuffed in the URL. So val URL equals intent.get string extra URL. And then we'll say, hey, this URL is done, colon URL. Okay? So let's run that. So now just to be clear, this service, when it does this, this is fake. It's not really going to download anything because I just don't care. I don't actually want to look at the file. I'm just playing around. But I think this fake downloading function is going to do a delay just to simulate as if the file were kind of big. And it's going to delay for about 3 seconds, I think. So I think if this is all working, if I click the little list item, it should sort of sit there for a second. And then it should log and say, this URL is done after about 3 seconds. So let's try. Okay. Get the list. Let's do eve.jpg. And it said this URL is done, so it's working. It's exciting. It's got the URL. It knows the URL kind of lived through all that. I'll click poochie.jpg. And it'll say this URL is done. Awesome. So like you could download several. I can click 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. and it kind of didn't really work that well. Did you catch that? I don't think it actually even did all 5. Long messages are hard to read. I could also do like a toast, as well. I could say toast dot make text, and you pass this, but I think you have to say this download activity. URL is done. Toast dot length short dot show. So I could make that pop up like a toast message, so you could see that it's done. So let's try that real fast. So get the list, and I click here. This URL is done, eve.jpg. See, it's working. Click, 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 click. I'm just going to jam the buttons and click a whole bunch. And I think what I'm hoping you're noticing is it's not really responding very well to me mashing my fingers all over the screen. So any guesses what's happening here? Like, why doesn't it like me to mesh lots of files to download? I haven't really said why, but any theory why it doesn't handle this very well?
It is a time-consuming process. Like when one thing is going on, it doesn't like to be interfered with another thing.
Yeah, it's time-consuming. It's doing one thing. It's working on the previous file, so it doesn't want to listen about the next file. Yeah, I think that's right. And I mean, to put more of a finer point on it, all of these downloads are occurring in the same thread, basically, and so one of them starts and it's running, and if I try to queue up another one, it's just blocked by the last one, and the next one after that is blocked, but it just makes a big long line, they get blocked. Now, you might want that, but you might not. Maybe if I click 4 different files, I want all 4 of them to start downloading. So we have talked a little bit about threads, and so I believe my next couple slides here are going to be about threads. I want to talk about doing things in a thread. So by default, if an app or an activity starts a service, the service will sort of live in the same thread as that activity. This is usually not what you want, or at least once it starts doing long-running work, you probably don't want that. So what most people do is when the service kicks in and starts doing the work, it launches a thread to do that work. And you remember, threads are just sort of like pieces of code that are executing all within the same app. If you launch a couple threads, you can have the same app do more than one thing at a time. There's sort of concurrency going on there. So let's make some threads. It's actually not super hard to make a thread in Kotlin. You just say you want to create a thread object, and then it takes as a parameter a lambda of code that you want to run. And in here you do the work, and you say start that thread, and it'll start doing that kind of in the background. So now each command, each task that you do will run in a thread concurrently. Okay? So that's not too hard to add to our program. We can just come back here to the download service. So basically this part is the part that is happening concurrently. If there were a lot of things we were doing here, maybe we'd have a helper function for it or something. But so I'll just say val thread is a thread, and I want it to do that. And then I'll say thread.start. So what I'm hoping will happen here, I have a bug. Do you know what's wrong with this code as written? I mean, I'm on the right track here, but like, there's a pretty important thing wrong with this code.
Thread hasn't been cleaned.
Thread hasn't been cleared or cleaned, or like when it will free up when it's done. You don't actually have to do that. When the thread is finished, it'll clean itself up, luckily. Code is full of lies. There's something wrong about this code. Yeah.
Is it going to say it's done when it starts?
Yeah. So you're right. You said, is it going to say it's done when it just starts? So when you say thread.start, what that means is go kind of off on the side and start working on this task. Start working on this in the background. But this call to thread.start immediately returns, and this code keeps running here. So like the message of broadcast, I'm done. We were assuming that this code here was going to like pause until it was finished, and then this code would run after that. But if you lock it up in a thread, this doesn't pause anymore. It goes off over here, and this thread is working. But then it immediately continues over here as well. That's the whole point of threads, is that two things are running at the same time. So it's not the case that the download is done here. Where is the download done? Where should this code go? I mean, I do want to send out a broadcast when the download is done. It's just that that is not the place where the download is done. What do you say?
Inside the thread?
Inside the Lambda code of the thread. Right here, the download is done. I know it's kind of confusing if you haven't done a lot of this sort of programming before, but like it's really important to move that code up in there so that when this guy's done, now here is when I know the thread is done, not down here. Yes, okay, so let's try that. If that worked, what I should see is I should be able to mash, and it should download all of them concurrently. First of all, the UI should let me do the mashing. Second of all, it won't have a gap of 3 seconds between done, done, done. It should pop them all up pretty much right after each other. Let's try it. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So it says this URL is done, this URL is done, this URL is done, this URL. So it's like it's able to do them all kind of concurrently in the background. Get it? That's pretty typical for a service. Start a thread, do the work. The one thing I'm not going to talk about today that, like, if we were really doing this for realsies, you wouldn't necessarily pop off a thread for every single task, because you could imagine, what if I drop you 10,000 tasks to do? I probably don't want you to spawn 10,000 threads and download 10,000 files all at the same time. You probably want to do 4 at a time, 10 at a time. You want to have some kind of like pool of how many you're doing at a given moment. You start up 10 downloads or 5 downloads, and when one of them finishes, you move to the 6th one or whatever, right? So I don't want to code that because you have to kind of manage that a little bit. There's a little bit of ickiness to that I don't want to really get into. But like that's something like a real app would do, right? Any questions about this threading part of the code? This is a pretty important part. Like you have to do this basically, or else your service doesn't work very well. So, questions about this part? Okay, well, let's see, what else do I want to talk about? I think I'm almost done with, okay, so that's basically all I want to say about threads, but, or about services. But this app, this still is not quite the right picture because I'm still responding. I mean, it kind of goes back to Joan's question about like this broadcast receiver that pops up, like it goes back to the app and it's in the activity again. It's doing this broadcast receiver, this thing that we put over here, this receiver. I still think we have sort of this app-centric view of the world. Like, I do want to think about the world where like we totally exit this app and shut it all down. What will happen in that world? How does the service tell us that the download is done? So, I mean, basically, I want to talk about something called notifications. So let me jump to my slides on that for a second. Lecture slides. Notification. Okay, here we go. Okay, so this is kind of a fun little thing. Notifications are these little icons that you put up in the taskbar. You know them as those damn things that you can never clear out fast enough before another one pops up, right? So I'm going to teach you how to make your app annoying like that. But I mean, you know, as much as we sometimes find notifications annoying, like this is how a long-running app or service tells us something is happening, right? So on some level, we do need these, right? I mean, personally, I don't think mobile phones have solved the problem of notification hell where these things are all over the place, right? But, oh well. So yeah, notification, little message, little icon, little line in this drawer kind of in the top of your phone, right? So I'm going to teach you how to make them. You can typically, you'd have a service or activity would create one and send it to Android, and then it would appear in the list here. And a notification has several components, like it has a title and some text and maybe an icon, and it also has some sort of behavior, like if you tap it or drag it or something, what is it going to do? So, I mean, I'll teach you how to set up all those components. So just for starters, there's some terminology here. I mean, I picked some kind of rich, fancy. I'm not going to do all this with you guys because I mean, I only have like 20 minutes left. But like, there's a lot of stuff you can do. I mean, have you noticed if you do use an Android phone, you may have noticed over the past few years, like notifications have little control panels in them and stuff, and they can get really elaborate if you want them to. But I think the simplest notification sort of looks like one of these two, where it's got, you know, sort of an icon, and it's got a title, and it has sort of content, and it has, you know, maybe some text on the sides here. And some of these terms are important to know. The main reason I like this slide is like I can never remember what Android calls all these pieces, and these correspond to the names of methods, like set this thing to have that value. So I sort of want this to help me remember, like, because I think of the big text where it says the big meeting, I'm like, oh, that's called the title, but I don't know, it's called the content title. Okay, whatever. This little gray stuff here, that's the like text of the thing, right? No, it's the content text. If If you want a second row, it's called the subtext. I don't know, whatever. So if you want a notification, there's a class called notification.builder. You pass in this, where this is your activity or your service or whoever's doing this. It has a similar pattern. Do you remember where we saw this sort of code where you'd say make a builder and then set, and then you'd say build? Remember we saw something like that before? Well, can't blame you if you don't remember. It was briefly covered. We talked about making dialog boxes, like alert boxes that pop up. They have a dialog builder, so it's a little bit similar. But you make a notification builder, you set a bunch of things about it, you say build. The result of all that work is you get an object that is a notification object. The way that you send this thing to the operating system and make it appear is you have to get access to an object that's called a notification manager. A notification manager is actually a service, a system service that is launched by the Android operating system. This magical line of code here gets the thing and gives it to you as a variable. And you can call its notify method, and you can pass a notification to that method. It takes an ID number parameter, but this is like when you sometimes have IDs for returning results from activities and intents. You can just kind of make up an ID that you want to make up and use it. So that's kind of the gist of it. And so, if I'm going to be doing this in my app today, who do you think is doing this sort of stuff? Like, where do you think I might put code like this? What file, what part of the code?
In the service?
In the service, yeah. When the service is done downloading a file, maybe I'll pop up a notification that says your download is done. And it'll be in the tray of notifications, right? So let's try to do that. So if I just steal this stuff for a second, and I go to download service. So I think what's starting to happen here, like I really don't like when we just get to the point where there's a giant function everywhere, right? So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to split the work into 3 pieces. So I think I'm going to write, do the work for this URL, something like that. And I'm going to write a function, do work, URL, string. It's a decomp, right? I got to get a check plus for style here. So download the actual thing, notify people that it's done. Let's also make a notification. So let's call that make notification for that URL. And so another function, private fun make notification URL string. Okay, so you paste, oops, wait, I lost my copy. Paste that. So a couple things that are going on here. I need to import this. This thing says set small icon or drawable icon. It's basically saying you can have a little icon on the notification if you want one. I went and just Googled for an image. I did Google image search. I'd search for like download icon. And so in this project, I have a file, I think I do, in Drawable called like icon download. It's just like a little picture of a down arrow or something. Okay, I thought it'd be cooler if it had an icon. So I'll say Drawable icon download. Okay, and then the title, maybe I'll say your download is done, and the content text, I'll say the URL or something like that. I don't know, whatever, right? Like that. And we can talk about all these setters in a minute, what they all do. Now the other thing is, once you get this notification manager, you have to notify people and you have to send in an ID. So like, what's the ID supposed to be? You just kind of make up the ID. You just kind of make one up. So I think what I did is I just made one up like 1, 2, 3, 4. That's also my luggage combination. So maybe I'll use that. And now this will get sent out. It'll be showed on the screen. That's kind of all you need to do. I'll show you a little more, because the one thing that's missing is when you tap on the notification, what do you want it to do? So I'll show that in just a second. So we got a little bit more to learn. So here there's a million setting methods. I don't want to go into all these different methods, but you can look at them later, you can look them up. There's all kinds of notifications. There's ones that show progress bars, and there's one that show sound effects, and there's one that have numbers and priorities, and the ones that of different colored lights and tickers and vibrations and different things, and I don't know. I don't use most of these things, but yeah, you can take a look. Oh, there's a really obnoxious flag called set auto cancel. If you set it to false, the notification will not go away when you click on it. So if you want to be a complete asshole, set this to false and then just build a bunch of notifications and launch them, and you'll just flood the person's tray, and there's literally nothing they can do to get rid of them, and they will hate you, and it'll be great. So like, you know, fool your friends with Homework 7 and pop up a bunch of these auto cancel set to false, and you'll be a big jerk face developer. Yeah. So anyway, if you want the notification to do something when you tap on it, the way that you do that is you make an intent and you sort of pack that intent into the notification. I mean, right, everything's intents in Android. And but since Android sucks and they make everything confusing, the intent part's not so bad, but you have to make this other object called a pending intent. I don't think I could explain to you why you need to do this. It's just sort of like a wrapper around the intent that sort of tells it that it'll do it later or something. For the life of me, I can't understand why they designed it this way, but you have to make an intent that's pending. You pass in the intent that you're interested in and some zeros and stuff. And then once you've got that, that's what you actually tell your notification builder to use. So, I don't know if it's clear what I'm doing here, but let me try to piece all this together with the time that we have left. So before I build the notification, I want to say, like, when you tap on it, it should pop up the downloader app again. It should pop up the downloader activity. So maybe I'll make an intent, and I'll pass in this and the class name. So I'll say like this and downloader activity class.java. And then whatever else I want that activity to know about, maybe I'll say intent.put extra. It seems like I'm always passing around this URL. Just tell everybody like what happened, what's going on here. Maybe I'll even give it that action is a download complete, whatever. Just hey downloader activity, I'm done, and this is the URL. Now I have to wrap it in that dumb pending intent thing. So that's just sort of this code. Builder set content intent to be this pending guy. Now all of that is so that when user clicks this notification, launch the downloader activity. Launch the downloader app and go into that activity. Okay? So again, the point of this is if they quit the app, I want to pop up a notification that they can tap on that'll jump them back into the app. That's the point. The app wasn't going to do that before. So I mean, I kind of dodged your question a few minutes ago. You said, what's that broadcast receiver going to do? Like if I'm not in the app or I'm not in the activity, is it going to tell the activity? Is it going to pop it back up? Answered no. It's going to tell you if you're still in the app and you never left. If you did leave, you need this to jump you back in. So I mean, this probably all feels like a big labyrinth of bullshit, but whatever. Okay, we're very close. We're very close. There is a little more bullshit that we have to do. Let's see. I don't think I need to do this slide. I think I can keep moving. This is the part that really made me mad. When I prepped the lecture for this quarter, this is a new thing because everything changes and gets worse in Android over time. In Android 8, which is pretty recent, they made it so that notifications have to have an additional piece of information packed into them called a channel. And I think they did that so that people could have more control over notifications, like muting them, silencing them, turning them off. And so now, if you don't do this garbage on this slide, it throws an exception and doesn't work anymore. And your notification won't work. They didn't ask me, this is what they did. So this is another one of these like copy paste the thing sort of things. Where is that? That is when you make the notification builder up here, when you're trying to put this notification together, you need to you need to have this piece of code here that says, well, am I Oreo version O, which is version 8 of Android, or greater? If I am, I make this notification channel thing. The notification channel needs an ID and a name, and the ID is, I think I have this ID parameter somewhere like this thing. Oh wait, what happened to my, I think my brackets are messed up, but I think I need a bracket down here. But okay, fine. The notification channel also needs a name as a string, and I just declared one down here that's just some long string that I just made up. So, okay, declare a stupid name for this thing too. So, let's see, why does that not work? There. So once you've created this stupid channel, then you can tell the notification manager about the channel, and then when you make a notification builder, you can pass the same notification ID, and now I think it'll use that channel, and now I think the notification will work. So I basically just have to incorporate this into my code a little bit here. I guess this stuff all sort of goes up in there as well. If I were coding this, properly, I think I would have an else. Wait, let me see. There, I think I did that right. Sorry, I'm kind of trying to get done in the time I have here. The problem is, like, if you have the else, like if you have an older version of Android, the code I wrote before would have worked fine. So you have to kind of handle that if else by having a branch for both. I think maybe for class I'll just leave it with the if, because oh wait, did I think I deleted the wrong thing here. Sorry. I've found this code pretty tough to write, actually. Okay, I think I did all that right. What a mess, right? Let's see if I manage to piece this together. I'm a little terrified that the whole thing will crash and burn at this point, but let's see. Do you feel like this sometimes when you're coding your Android app? You like wrote some new code and you're like, I have about a 4% confidence that any of this shit is going to work, right? Okay. So if this worked, it'll take 3 or 4 seconds, and then when it's done, a notification will appear up here. That's like if somehow we got this to work. I didn't think it was going to work, honestly. Now look at this. It says your download is done, blah, 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 blah. And if you tap on it, it popped this app back up. Did you catch that? I wasn't in the app, it popped it back up. Now it went back to the initial empty state or whatever because I did exit the app and reload the app, right? So there's just the teeniest bit more. I mean, I know we want to be done and we're almost done. Like this is all correct. All the stuff we wrote is fine here, okay? But the app didn't seem to like do anything special. It popped up the app, but the app didn't seem to understand why I was popping the app up. I popped up the app because that download was done. So the app should know that and say something about that, like, hey, I noticed you came back because this download there was done, right? So how does the app do that? Well, let me ask you. I mean, I made an intent that would launch the activity, right? So how do you think the activity, I mean, this intent had some information in it. Theoretically, the app's activity would want that information or something, right? Like, how does the activity react to the fact that it's being fired up from this notification? What do you think? Have any ideas? I don't know if my question's even clear, but like, you have a thought? Yeah. Use a bundle. It's close. I mean, in the activity here, I think you're definitely on the right track because when the activity loads up, it calls this onCreate function, right? And the onCreate has a bundle. And so you're thinking maybe I have stuff in the bundle, I can look in there. But like kind of similarly to that, the activity has a field, a property that's called intent, which means the intent that was used to launch this activity. Now if the app starts up clean from nowhere, that intent is null. But if it was started up from another activity who sent me an intent, or if it started up from a notification that had a pending intent, like this one, there will be something in there. So you could do something like this. If my intent isn't null, I was launched by a notification because a download completed. So whatever, do something with that download. This whole app's fake anyway, so maybe I could just say something like val URL equals intent dot get string extra URL. That's the thing that got packed in that intent in the first place. So maybe I could just say like toast, hey, I'm back because you finished this file, colon, URL. Something like that. I think I need to pass more stuff. Toast dot length short dot show. Okay. I could say, well, but if the intent is null, I could just say like, where I could say, I started up the normal way. Sad face. There. So that's the idea. Let me run this perhaps one last time. So I think when the app pops up, it'll say, I started the normal way. I think, I hope. Oh, I'm back because you finished this file null. So actually, I don't think the intent is null. I think its extra parameter is null. Whatever. But I get the list. I tell it I want to download Eve. I get bored, so I leave the app. I'm out of the app. The URL is done. Hooray, a notification appears. I want to go look at this. I click here. Boing, hey, I'm back because you finished eve.jpg. So I'm back in the app. So it's this big mess, but like this is how you glue all these pieces together so that the activity can come back when the service is done with its work. I'm not going to say any of this is pretty, but this is how you do this stuff. It seems like it's important for a lot of kinds of apps. So, okay, I will stop there. We got section later tonight and tomorrow, and we'll continue on Thursday. So thanks. See you then.